The first thing I smelled was gasoline where gasoline shouldn't be. The second thing I heard was my neighbor yelling that my cornfield was a fire hazard. And the third thing I felt, right under the breastbone, was that quiet, heavy kind of dread that doesn't look like much on paper, but will keep you wide awake at 3 a.m. counting what you could lose if one bad night turns into a worse morning. I was holding an ear of early sweet corn in my palm, silk still sticky, the husk cool from dawn, and I was looking over the fence at Delia Crane, the HOA president over in Brookstone Meadows, standing there in pressed slacks and a lemon-colored blouse, like she was headed to a ribbon cutting, preaching to a half-circle of dog walkers about community risk and negligent agricultural practices. While her own backyard still smelled like kerosene from the tiki torches she'd left burning at last. Night's Wine and Cheese Summit. I almost laughed, I really did, because green corn doesn't light. Not like she imagined. Then the wind shifted across the brome, and the smell sharpened. Chemical, wrong, and the laugh died in my throat. I'm Hank Miller. My granddad built our well by hand and laid out 15 acres in neat rectangles that catch the evening sun like someone painted them on. We sit right where the county blacktop stops pretending to be a country lane and starts flexing into a brand new subdivision. A place with a gate, a clubhouse, a pool shaped like a comma, and an HOA that writes emails like commandments. My land predates their covenants by half a century. Our deeds say agriculture. Our taxes say agriculture. Our life, definitely agriculture. I plant corn and beans, rotate in rye and clover, sell sweet corn and heirloom tomatoes at the Saturday market. And every August I get nervous because this is when bills come due and forecasts play favorites, and one hailstone can write a different ending than the one you've been working toward since March. Add an HOA president who thinks a corn tassel insults her property values, and you've got yourself a summer you'll never forget. Delia had been circling me for months, polite at first, sugarcoating everything. Hank, do you think you could screen your compost bins? They're visible from the street. Then a little sharper, dust during planting has become a recurring concern. Then downright official. Final fire hazard notice. Immediate compliance required. She slid that last one into my inbox with a PDF attachment that looked like a court order if you didn't know any better. I read it 3 times, looked at the letterhead she designed herself, shook my head, saved the file anyway. 20 years of farming taught me there's a difference between a nuisance and a pattern. Patterns you document. That morning the pattern got real. On my side of the fence, my side, half buried in the tall grass near the sagging cedar post bowing from old age, I found 3 red plastic gas cans tucked like Easter eggs, still slick with residue. The weeds underneath were pressed down where someone had crouched for a while. A yard inside the boundary, wired to a cheap kitchen timer with electric tape, sat a spark igniter, the kind you can buy online with a prepaid card and a shipping address that's not quite yours. I didn't touch a thing. I backed away like the ground itself might testify later. Then I jogged to the shed and pulled the SD card from the trail cam I'd installed after somebody siphoned diesel out of my Massey Ferguson last year. I sat on the tailgate with my thermos and a stomach that wouldn't stay put and watched grainy gray footage of Delia herself. No mistaking that sharp bob and the way she checks her watch like time owes her interest. Stepping through the fence 2 nights earlier with a crossbody tote and a little flashlight, she cupped like a thief, moving along my rows with deliberate care, marking distances, planting those timers like seeds. When she turned toward the camera, the IR caught her face full on. I paused there, not because I needed proof, God knows it was enough, but because it hit me how quietly people can decide to ruin you when they think the rules are a suggestion for everyone except them. I called Nate O'Brien, a lawyer who spent enough hours in county court defending ranchers and growers that he knows the difference between a boundary dispute and a felony. He opened the email, watched the clip, leaned back, and let out a breath that sounded like the last straw breaking. "This isn't civil," he said, tapping the timer with a pencil eraser. "This is arson for profit and insurance fraud, if there's any follow-through. It's conspiracy if there are more players." And from the way she moves, Hank, she's rehearsed. He picked up his phone. "We're calling federal." I don't know what you picture when you hear federal, but here's what rolled into my drive just before dusk. An unmarked SUV, a state fire marshal van, and a county cruiser that kept to the shade like a hound dog that knows better than to spook the herd. Special Agent Rory Calder introduced himself without a smile or a frown. Just that neutral, Steady presence that says he's seen this movie enough times to know how it ends if nobody steps in. He asked permission to walk my fence. He gloved up, crouched where the cans hid, sniffed the brome, grunted when the field kit flared green on hydrocarbons. He asked about my irrigation layout. Wind eddies off the hedgerow, where the corn is densest, where the brome would ladder if it caught. I showed him the bow and the fence, the line of sight to Delia's porch, the way the subdivision's manicured berm funnels air toward my low spot. He listened, nodded, took notes. "Mr. Miller," he said finally, "we believe she'll try soon, tonight or tomorrow. Our intel says she purchased additional accelerant and a handful of timing devices. We'd like to stage surveillance and response, place infrared at your corners, a unit down the access lane, a team near the clubhouse. If you're willing, we'll issue you a panic transmitter. Press it once the attempt begins. We need the act as well as the plan." He looked past me toward the porch where my wife, Lily, sat with our daughter, Emily, cutting peaches for a cobbler like you do when your hands can't fix the world, but they can make something sweet anyway. "We'll keep them safe," he said, and it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a procedure, like railings and harnesses and brake checks. You'd think agreeing to a sting would make you feel powerful, like you're about to turn the tables, but mostly it makes you hyper-aware of every ordinary thing. The creak in the barn door, the way the pump clicks as it spins down, the dog's ears pricking at every breeze. I did my chores like a man playing a part, checked the belts, logged moisture, moved a pallet of mineral from here to there, waved to the two joggers who always pretend not to notice me, then locked the outer gate and set the bales just where the marshal asked, because the engine would need a clean approach if flames showed yellow. The air was thin and hard, September dry, the kind of evening that hears everything and tells on everyone. Just after midnight, the phone buzzed a single time, position south fence, and then in my west camera a pair of shapes slit the black. Delia led, no mistaking that crisp, determined posture even in night vision, and a taller man drifted behind her, carrying a metal case that clinked against his thigh. They moved like dancers who've practiced, pausing where the brome knits into the row, bending, wiring, setting. Up close, I caught the click of a lighter cap and the scratch, then a beat, then the faintest breath of flame as the first wick took. I pressed the transmitter. "This is Miller. Ignition south and west. 2 suspects inside the fence. The county night can be dead until it isn't." Diesel rumbled far down the lane. Tires hissed on dust, red and white washed the stalks, and voices cut the dark. "Federal agents, drop it. Hands where we can see," while a different team hit the southwest corner and worked a black line into the wind to starve the fire's heart. Delia bolted for the sag in the fence, because of course she did. The taller man froze like prey, because of course he did, and Special Agent Calder came in steady from their flank, light high, camera unit behind him, voice level like he was asking what you'd like for breakfast. "On your knees. Lace your fingers. Don't be brave." The taller one obeyed. Delia made it 2 steps, hit the wire, tangled, went down hard, and the deputy had her elbow before she could turn righteous. 8 minutes, 33 seconds from first lick to handcuffs, and a neat little bouquet of scorched timers cooling in the dirt like dead flowers. 40%. That's what the fire took before the black line ate it. Loss doesn't always roar. Sometimes it settles on you in flakes while professionals do their jobs around you. The fire crew soaked, mopped, turned dirt. The marshal's investigator scraped the igniters into evidence cans, swabbed residues that flashed bright on petroleum. Calder bagged the lighter, tagged the timer, photographed the fence scrape where they'd wedged it open. He let me stand there, arms crossed tight enough to hurt, looking at rows I'd walked 100 times suddenly short, broken, wrong. I felt stupid for caring about stocks when my family was safe and the plan worked, then mad for feeling stupid, then tired in a way that comes from deep down where sleep doesn't touch. Dawn is merciless but honest. By 6:30, the SUVs rolled to a stop outside Delia's 2-story with the potted hydrangeas and the flag that always read, "Welcome." And federal agents walked up the stone path in that measured way. A search warrant in a plastic sleeve, no theatrics, no barking, just lawful entry into the house of the woman who told everyone within earshot that my field was a menace to civilization. Neighbors clustered in robes, phones low but recording, while boxes came out labeled financials, claims, maps, Correspondence. Through the open office door, I saw a corkboard like something in a TV procedural, tracks outlined in yellow, arrows from her subdivision into my acreage, post-its with dates that matched last week's fire hazard, email, and, God help me, weather screenshots showing wind and humidity like she was in charge of the forecast too. On her desk, pre-filled forms for property distress acquisitions and a slideshow titled Community Growth Opportunities. Later, the Bureau showed me footage we'd legally captured the night before the attempt. Delia in the HOA clubhouse after hours with two men in suits, their briefcases and that careful, greedy way of nodding while she narrated, pitching inevitable losses and rapid claim processing and market-advantaged repurposing of boundary parcels. She said, clear as sunrise, sometimes property owners need dramatic motivation to accept reasonable offers. Like she was discussing paint colors, not burning somebody's year to ash. They arrested her husband after lunch for conspiracy. Turns out the man with the metal case was his cousin-in-law, and the insurance adjuster on Delia's speed dial had texted things like, "We'll be ready to move the moment smoke appears." The property assessor she'd paraded at HOA meetings got cuffed before dinner. The news hit like a mower on a Sunday, slow, loud, unavoidable. My phone filled with messages from other growers. We had a small accident last fall after a rezoning vote. Watch your fence line. We caught a gas can in a ditch, but couldn't prove it. Will the feds talk to us too? Court is colder than TV makes it look. The indictment hearing wasn't fireworks. It was formality and weight. The U.S. attorney read counts: arson, fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, and Delia stood with her chin up like she was about to be awarded a plaque for outstanding service to the neighborhood. The adjuster and the assessor folded fast, deals for cooperation, statements on tape, calendars and emails that lined up with accelerant purchases and blacked out HOA work sessions. The judge didn't play. When it came time for victim impact, I didn't shout. I told a straight story: spring planting on a line of credit, nights running numbers at the kitchen table, a kid's tuition scheduled against a harvest, a wife who keeps the pantry and the books and worries in quiet. Then how it felt to smell fuel where there should be dew, how it felt to see timers wired to my fence, how it felt to watch a pretty woman in a pressed blouse become a person willing to make fire where food should grow. You didn't just burn corn, I told her. You burned trust. Mine, my daughters, my neighbors. And that takes longer to grow back than any crop I know. Sentencing landed like a door shutting. 25 years combined for the counts that stuck. $500,000 in fines. Restitution pegged to every ear lost, every day of delayed delivery, every dollar of attorney hours that didn't plant or harvest a thing. Asset forfeiture stripped the gift she'd given herself. A rental condo in the city bought with consulting proceeds, a second SUV titled to a shell, investments seeded with quick insurance payouts from other incidents that started to look a lot like mine when you set them side by side. Special Agent Calder called me outside the courthouse. "We can't give back nights of sleep," he said. "But the check for Emily's freshman year will come from the sale of her house. That's law bringing money back to where it was stolen from." I said thank you and meant it, and I meant this too. You never really get even. You just get back to level ground where work makes sense again. What comes after is quieter, but still important. Brookstone Meadows elected a new board and printed a public apology that the county weekly ran above a long list of lessons learned. The new president, a school counselor named Tasha who wears sneakers to meetings and starts with "Does anybody have food allergies?" invited me to talk at the clubhouse about farm operations and fire behavior. I said yes on a Tuesday night. I brought a coil of brome, a wet corn stalk, a dry husk, and a little torch, and I showed them what burns and what doesn't and why timing and weather are everything. Folks asked thoughtful questions. A few cried when they apologized. One man pulled me aside by the punch bowl and said he'd sign one of Delia's early petitions because she was persuasive and I was busy. And I told him the truth. Persuasive isn't the same as right, and busy isn't the same as blind. And sometimes the difference is whether you ask who profits if you say yes. The sheriff's office held a town hall on staged hazards, what they look like, how to report without escalating, when to call 911, and when to call a lawyer. The state fire marshal sent out a bulletin to every department in 3 counties, photos of the exact timer and igniter setup we found, a reminder that property disputes sometimes come wrapped in accelerant. The Bureau took our case, names redacted, and turned it into training slides, patterns of arson for profit near HOA boundaries, indicators of insurance claim prepositioning, community power structures used as cover. It felt strange knowing our worst night was a bullet point in a conference room somewhere, but it also felt like the pain took on purpose when it helped somebody else see the next one coming in time to stop it. And the field did what fields do when you don't give up on them. Black turns gray, gray turns to shy green lines, and a cover crop knits a wound closed while the soil forgives you for taking too much for too long. I walked the rows with Emily in a hoodie and muddy sneakers, and she said, "Does this feel like winning?" And I said, "It feels like breathing." And she punched my arm and said, "You're getting poetic, Dad." And I told her not to rat me out to her mother. The first Saturday after sentencing, I hauled a smaller than planned load of sweet corn to the market, set up next to a guy who sells honey and a woman with lavender soaps. And people bought out my table anyway, because folks in our town vote with their feet when they can. The bakery across the way sent over a box of cinnamon rolls with a note that said, "For the Millers, because ash is not the end." A year from now, I'll still flinch when wind pushes through dry leaves just right, and I'll probably check the fence cameras more than once before I go to bed when the nights get short. But here's what I know now in my bones. Lines matter, and so do neighbors, and so does the difference between power and authority. If someone tells you your livelihood is a hazard, ask what they're really scared of: noise, dust, a view that isn't curated. If a committee waives a rule book that never applied to your deed, ask who wrote it and how they get paid. If you smell gasoline where there should be dew and earth and work, don't argue on the sidewalk. Write things down, call people whose job is evidence, and let the law do what it's there to do. Because sometimes the most responsible thing you can do for a community is to say, out loud, "No, this isn't a difference of opinion. This is a crime. And since you've been with me this long, thank you for that. Let me put the questions where they belong, right in your hands. Was that sentence too heavy, too light, or exactly right for what was done? Does 25 years balance the scale when you torch a family's year for a line item on a spreadsheet? Should any HOA, no matter how influential, ever have a say over farms they don't govern if they claim community risk? Where do you draw the line between a neighborhood's idea of serenity and a family's right to work their land the way it's been worked for 3 generations? And if you'd been in my boots that night, would you have let the match touch so the cameras could capture the truth? Or would you have shouted and chased and risked the whole case blowing away like smoke in a crosswind? Drop your take in the comments. Argue it clean and hard. Tell me what you think justice looks like when power lives across the fence from labor. And if this story stirred anything in you, anger, relief, a memory of your own, share it with someone who needs the reminder that fences aren't battle lines and neighbors aren't enemies unless they decide to be. We rebuilt, not because we're special, but because enough people decided the line between right and wrong is worth defending with more than a Facebook post. If you agree, stick around. We've got more stories where this came from. And if the next person who says fire hazard means do what I want or else, well, I hope they watched this to the end and saw exactly how that went.